Hey YouTube, this is RL coming to you again from my channel, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Life Reviews with my good friend and co-host CK.
Hey everybody, how are you guys doing?
Hope everyone's well. So we're going to be reviewing the classic game for the NES, Mega Man 2.
Yes, The Mystery of Dr. Wily, apparently is the subtitle is for it. It's an action game developed and published by Capcom. It was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in Japan in 1998, and then in North America and PAL regions in Europe the following year. Mega Man 2 basically continues the saga of the original Mega Man series. Quite frankly, it feels like the finished version of what Part 1 should have been.
Alright, so we review everything on a like, love, and loathe scale, with graphics, music, combined with sound effects, gameplay, controls, difficulty, fun factor, replay value, and story if applicable. So, what did you think of the graphics in Mega Man 2, CK?
The graphics in Mega Man 2 are pretty basic. I mean, they follow the trends of the games back in that generation, the late 80s. Limited palette, but bright colors, clean, large enough sprite to see enough details. Like a lot of games that suffered from flickering, this game kind of does as well. Not so much in the slowdown that I've noticed anyway. And a lot of repeated sprites. I guess they got away with being able to build a bigger game, and especially large platformer like this with a lot of sprites. It's pretty cool. I like the level designs. They're very different. It's fun. It's kind of childish and kiddie, but requires a lot of control, which we'll get into later in the review. I give graphics a retro-like.
Nice. So graphics for me, it's a very nice looking game. It's basic. Details are nice. Lots of blues, reds, and pinks I've noticed in the colors. So not a lot of color variations. There's some browns as well, but there's a nice variety of different levels. Some of the areas that I don't like are the waterfalls. I find it looks a little bit kind of Caesar-ish waterfall. Yeah, very flickerish. Never had any issues with me, but I just could see some people having some issues with that. It's an interesting graphic design, limitations of the graphic card at the time, but it gets the job done. It's good. I'll give it a retro double like for graphics. We're going to streamline a little bit music and sound effects from now on, so we're not going to do it separately. So what did you think of the music and sound effects in this game, CK?
Now with kind of pooling them together, we can kind of speed through the sound effects part, because most games, the sound effects don't really stand out as much unless they do. And if they don't, usually that's a good thing for us. For this game, they're fairly standard. I mean, a lot of the sound effects in this sound like a lot of the sound effects in most Capcom games, and quite frankly, most Nintendo games of that generation, so there's really not much to speak about there. With regards to the music, though, this is where this game truly does stand out. I love all the music in the Mega Mans, like through 1 through 4, easily. I'd play any one of them, pick any one of them to play in a playlist on an MP3 player. This is one of those games that gets you into the groove and gets you into the feel of each of the levels with its own type of track. You may not love everything, but I like a lot of the tracks because they're musically composed, not just a bunch of sounds and a score for levels. My favorite would be Metal Man. One of the levels is my favorite. Quick Man's track is pretty good too. And because I enjoy music in this game, I'm going to kind of round it up and give music and sound effects a retro love.
Nice. You really liked it a lot.
I did.
Really loved it a lot, I should say.
Yeah.
Not liked it. Loved it. Yeah, so music and sound for me. Yeah, sound effects, they're basic. And the music is upbeat and very jumpy, very upbeat. Not my kind of music, to be honest. I don't hate it, but it's not something I grew up with, so I don't really have that passion to it like the Mario music or Contra. There's nothing that stands out. It is enjoyable. They did take the time to do something really awesome with it, and it's not annoying, but it's not crazy amazing that I'm gonna be like wanting to jam to it. It's middle ground, probably a little bit better than average for the NES for that generation. It's kind of iconic for some. I just didn't grow up with it, so it's not iconic for me. I like the music, but I don't love it, so my score is going to reflect that, and I'm going to give it a retro like for music and sound. Alright, so we're moving on to gameplay. What did you think of the gameplay in this game?
I enjoyed the gameplay in this game. After getting to play it again, I haven't played it for a very long time. And getting back into it, I realized how tricky but fun it is at the same time. And that's kind of a mixed emotion presentation thing. What Mega Man 2 lacks in visual presentation, it makes up for in spades with gameplay. And that's one thing about this game that stands out. The level development, the platforming in itself is very, very different. You have levels that are fully vertical, go completely up and down. You have ones that go complete side to side, and there's so much to explore. If you're looking at an actual bitmap shop of a whole level laid out as a single graphic, you'd see how insanely detailed these guys spent time mapping your character through a particular course. There are not a lot of baddies, and it's not very difficult in that sense, but being able to maneuver Mega Man, climb ladders, jump on platforms while shooting at the same time makes for a very challenging game and a very entertaining game for me anyway. When you die in a stage, you can continue on the stage or you can prompt for the password, which allows you to kind of go back to that state, or at least with whatever effects or things that you've unlocked, you get to continue and keep them. And I think that part of the gameplay for this game is really what makes Mega Man stand out as well as an individual game in the 8-bit space, especially on the platformer side of things. And with all that kind of said, and the energy that I get out of that game, I really love it. Therefore, my score reflects that, and gameplay gets a retro love.
Oh wow, you really love this game. I'm hating on it. You're loving it, so it's all good. It's a game that's a very enjoyable game. So gameplay for me, lots of jumping, a lot of platforming. I felt that it was like a lot of like Mario, like more the newer kind of Mario, like in more like the Mario in the Super NES era. I think this game is more complex than the original Mario from the NES era. I think Mario incorporated a lot of Mega Man in the later years of Mario. I feel a lot of elements that I was seeing in this game, Mario took some of those elements, incorporated some of those elements that were a little more detailed. So it's great gameplay. It's a lot of fun, and I love a lot of the areas where you're like going on like little platforms and you're moving around and you have to get to the next ladder. Gameplay is really awesome. I'm gonna give it a retro double like for gameplay. So let's move on to controls. What'd you think of the controls in this game, CK?
Controls for me is a big part of the experience. The gameplay, the replay value, all of these things kind of tie back to controls. I'm a very technical person. If you've seen it, heard any of my previous reviews, I'll like a game for the technical aspects, I'll dislike a game for the overall effect or experience. This game is no different when it comes to my love for technical builds. The control, pinpoint jumping, probably one of my favorite things in 8-bit gaming, and Mega Man has it. You can jump and you can move left and right while in the air. It allows you to get those precise jumps, and it's very important, especially in a game like this where you're jumping and shooting at the same time, avoiding bullets, avoiding baddies, trying to hit platforms, and so on and so forth. They double down with long and short jumps. Now, not every game that has pinpoint jumping gives you the long and short jumps. I think the original Mario and all the Marios pretty much give you a long short jump based on a tap or a press of the button. Mega Man does that as well, and that's a huge step when it comes to being able to control your character in the game. Little known secret, and maybe other people know this, but when you're on Flashman's level, which is like an ice level, and like in any Mario game, when you're running and you change directions, you slide or slowly come to a stop once you try to change directions. If you tap the jump button while holding the opposite direction, instantly grips and moves the opposite way. Great way for you to kind of move back and forth and get out of the way of attacks and baddies and edges of platforms if you were ever to fall off. I love control in games, and this game does it all. Therefore, it gets a retro double love from me.
Wow, you really love this game. You're going on the high end. I'm going to be low end this time. That's so weird for me. I'm usually the high, but no, you really love it. So controls for me, the controls are very good, very solid. I think this game could have been a lot harder than it would have been if it wasn't for the controls being so Mario. I'm going back to Mario, but very tight and very effective, and jumping and all those elements that you need to use in this game to get past certain levels are handled very well, because they're not loosey-goosey, but the controls are smooth, they're tight, and the jumping is not difficult at all. The controls are great. They do the job, as I said, Mario style. They don't feel like you have to press on the buttons that hard to get the D-pad to get to where you need to go. So it gets a retro love for controls.
Sounds about right.
Alright, so moving on to difficulty. What do you think of the difficulty in this game?
Unlike Part 1, Mega Man 2 has a normal and a difficult mode right out of the gate, which is pretty cool. I mean, the fact that there's a choice is always nice, as you've brought it up in many other reviews that we've done. When it gives you an option for difficulty, it's always always nice to be able to have that out of the gate, an easy hard or an easy medium hard or whatever the case may be. Also, in this game, difficulty kind of fits right in with replay value, which we'll get to, and gameplay, which I kind of brought up earlier. Choosing the optimal way to play the game also adds to the difficulty factor. And by this, I mean that if you know anything about Mega Man, or if you've heard anything about Mega Man, there is an optimal order in which to play and defeat the baddies to be able to use their weapons, clear levels, and defeat the next boss. Though you can clear the game going just ad hoc and picking whatever you want and using the default weapon, is always a strategic angle to it. And that strategic angle adds to the difficulty, or I should say the ease of the game, which is part of the difficulty. Those things together make this game really cool. Now, add on the fact that you can use passwords. Passwords get you to levels to be able to continue where you've left off with unlocked weapons or effects. Certain bosses already beaten, if you've beaten them already, and you need to go back to the game, so you're not left with leaving your console on and having to go back and continue, or dying and not being able to just go back and say, man, I wish I could get back that 25 minutes that I used. Difficulty is important in games like this, especially with games that are longer, multi-levels, and give you really great control. It adds to the replay value. And for that, difficulty in this game gets a retro love.
Nice. Consistent review for you. You love this game. Alright, so difficulty for me, I feel it's a hard game. I always had a lot of difficulty playing this game when I was younger. I mean, when I started getting into retro gaming, like maybe 10 years ago, which is younger.
Yes, it is.
Not younger. Yeah, younger. I didn't know the levels of which to do, how to choose the levels of which to go about in the order you need to go about. And I know there is a lot of strategy involved where you have to pick a certain level first to acquire certain power-ups that allow you to play the game faster or easier. If you go about it a certain way, if you don't go about it the right way, you'll probably have a little bit more harder time with this game.
Correct.
So you gotta do some research there. So yeah, you put some effort in it. If you know what you're doing, the game can be a lot less hard than it really would appear to be when you start to play it. For me, I don't have that kind of patience knowing which one to pick first, and I just go what I feel like my mood and say, alright, I'll choose that one because I like the name, or I just figure I'm gonna go in order. I don't know.
Right.
So for me, it's a difficult game. I think it's a little difficult for me compared to maybe some other people, or for you. I find it a little too difficult for my liking, so I'm going to give it a retro-like for difficulty because I felt it was a little too difficult for my liking, but it's still a great game. So moving on to the fun factor. What'd you think of the fun factor in Mega Man 2?
I think the game is a fun game. I like all the features of the game. The game is a bit long for me, and getting back into it again from playing it such a long time ago, it wasn't fun at the beginning because I died a lot of times. And to your point of the game being difficult, it truly is kind of out of the gate. Once you get a hang of it, it becomes a lot more fun. It's obviously people who are seeking the challenge and trying to better themselves. Some just get too frustrated, they don't want to bother. I did the same way too, so fun factor isn't that high for me. I'm going to give fun factor a retro-like. I like the game, but I don't love it.
Oh, but you love it so much in other categories. What happened?
Technical love versus actual play. There is a difference.
Got it.
Yeah.
You're very complicated in that regard. All right, no worries. All right, fun factor for me. I felt the fun was taken away because of the difficulty. So I didn't really enjoy it as much because of that. And for me, if it's too difficult, it takes away from the fun. It's still a fun, enjoyable game because it's got some really good mechanics and the graphics are interesting to look at. And there's some interesting gameplay. I'm not crazy about the fact that you can't shoot up. I was going to say that in controls, but I forgot. Baddies are coming at you from all directions, and you can only shoot side to side, which makes it a lot harder. I don't know why they didn't do that. I guess there's limitations, but that takes away from the fun. So I'm going to give fun a retro. Want to be hard. I don't want to be too hard. I'm going to give it a half-like for fun.
Okay.
Still a fun game, just not as fun as of other games that I played in that era. Alright, so moving on to replay value. What do you think of the replay value of this game, CK?
For a lot of people, there would definitely be a massive replay value in this game. I'd agree on paper. Personally, I don't want to play the game too much because, quite frankly, it does get annoying. But once you get it, you get it. And getting through the different levels and playing the different bosses and using the different power-ups, sure. I mean, why would anyone not want to replay this over and over, especially to clear it, and then to clear it on a higher require harder difficulty, as well as potentially clearing the game without using any of the other additional power-ups, using the stock blaster. On top of that, jumping back into the game with passwords makes it a lot easier to just get back into the flow, get back into places that you've been with power-ups that you've had, and continue the game. Those two things alone make it very desirable to replay again. That's other people. Personally, I like playing the game. I wouldn't want to play it over and over. And because of that, it gets a retro-like from me.
That's fair. Our reviews are getting harsher as we go. Each category. Replay value for me, yeah, it's got some replay value because of the levels that you choose, and you could always go in different orders, so it makes it a little bit of more unique experience every time you try it again, which is great. Obviously creates more replay value, and as you learned which levels are the best to tackle first compared to another level, that does help with the replay value, but because it's really hard and it takes a lot of energy and patience to figure it out, it's a little bit too much for me in terms of the difficulty. I never really got that far, so it just replay value I don't think is very high for me. It's average, middle ground, so I'm gonna give it a retro-like for replay value. It's not terrible, it's not one of my favorite games for that era. I'll choose Contra or a Mario game over this particular game, so replay value that'll reflect that. It's a like for replay value. So moving on to the influence score. What do you think the influence is in this game?
Massive influence. Mega Man 2 is probably the highest selling in the franchise, and because of Mega Man and because of the history, because of the franchise and because of Nintendo, it's become bigger than itself, and for that all kinds of properties have branched from it, and it gets a 2 for influence.
Yeah, this game definitely has a high influence. I'm gonna probably agree with you there. I think it's influenced so much. Even Mario, I feel, got influenced by this game later on in the Mario run. There's a lot of elements that you see from Mega Man. It's highly influenced. I'm going to give it a 2 as well for the influence. Alright, so this is the portion of review where we usually flip a coin, but this time we're not going to flip a coin because it's a special review next time. It's number 20!
Yes.
So I figured it'd be a cool idea to re-review our first ever game, Contra.
Nice.
Because now we have a whole new format, and we really didn't review it to the way we review it these days. So I thought it'd be really cool to re-review our first ever review in our 20th review. So technically it's like our 19th review.
Technically.
Alright, so weird. No flipping. That's so weird. So I don't get to lose this time.
Not this time.
Hey, next time. So we'll be reviewing Contra for the NES. Next review, our 20th review. Alright, thanks for being here, CK. It was a fun review.
Thank you for having me.
Alright, so we'll have more retro content in the weeks, months, and years to come. Bye for now.
Ciao, folks.